time for our last Fireside Chat of the U.S. version of the 2023 HEAL Conference, where these experts will have a freewheeling conversation on empathy and leadership. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Natanya Wachtel and renowned speaker, Dr. Neeta Nagra.
Okay, we're gonna be quick because it's the very last moments of the end of the day and it's gone for quite a while. Oh, I need the clicker, right? So this is probably one of, and I'm not just doing this as lip service, but legitimately one of the most empathetic group of people I've been at a conference with for a long time. That said, here's the topic. So we thought we would take a moment to play a little light and have a little fun with the idea of the antithesis of empathy at work. So, apologies, here. Oh, so I thought maybe some memes would help. And I thought maybe some of you were on the receiving end of some of these things and could relate. These are actual photos from actual offices. And I don't know if any of you in the room can relate to this, right? Thank you for all your hard work. We're going to reward you by giving you all these other people's work to finish, right? That's a common one. Oh, sorry, this is not, it's a little grainy, but, right? If you listen to your employees and you feel insecure because they seem to know something or have a solution to something and you didn't think of it, and then you dismiss that. That's not anyone here, I'm sure, never have done any of those things, but I'm sure you might have been on the receiving end of that. And or then what does that do? It tells you not to speak up, don't risk it, you know, it's ridiculous. But it's here, and I'm sure many of you in many different kinds of environments, academic or corporate or otherwise, even in nonprofit, right? Like there is this interesting situation where someone who is responsible for other people, a boss, a manager, takes that to mean they are in charge of you in such a way where they decide for you what is good, what is bad, and also how you have to pay them deference. And that's kind of the old way, I think, of the way we would have that construct, right? And so now we're looking, just like we talked about clinicians working with patients, health systems working with insurance, and other interventions to have folks take an active role in their care. It's similar in the office. And in fact, now through the sensationalized news of the Great Resignation and otherwise, and quiet quitting, right? Why is all that happening? Because people do not feel respected at the place that they spend most of their hours of the week, right? So there's only one or two more, just because I want to make sure you really get these true stories from the field.
That's not like something Mark would say.
Right? The size of my boss's ego just sucks the soul out of her employees. And lastly, this one, right? So if you speak up, a lot of people talked about psychological safety. And so we want to be short today, but we want to share a few genuinely real anecdotes with you around a few things, since again, I'm assuming with the forgive me heal folks asked out of you and me aside under assume, that most of you would never, ever treat others in the way of these memes, right? But there are other ways that sometimes we don't realize that the way we've set up a construct for the folks that we work with or that work for us might need to be supported in ways that we might not realize that are detrimental and actually have a cascade effect of limiting self-beliefs for them, and or even maybe because you are kind, but you don't necessarily give them the opportunity to feel like they can voice a concern or voice a criticism, and or if feedback doesn't come because you're afraid to give it, and then you have this passive aggressive churn underneath, right? So there's some small little things like that we just thought to talk about, only because we were thinking we don't have to tell these people how to be empathetic, right? So I'm going to turn it over to my lovely, esteemed co-panelist here to share a story, one example of that she's recently had within her teams, and I just thought it was really a great way to start.
Thank you, Natanya. So I guess before I start, I just wanted to share one quote, which I just recently resonated with when I was watching Spider-Man with my nephew Hookem, and that is, with great power comes great responsibility. And I really took a pause and thought about it because as a leader, that is essentially what it is. It's power. And so I'm actually going to ask you, and I'm going to give you guys a minute because I'm going to ask at least one or two of you to share. Why did you go into leadership? Like, how did you determine that you were going to have this power and what you were going to do with this power? So one of you guys can, or two of you guys can just quickly put up your hand and just share how or what you thought. That would be great. Yes, Brent.
I was born a leader, but I was also trained how to become a leader. And so what made me really rush into leadership is that I got tired of seeing myself and others be treated less than what we needed to be treated like. And so I became the voice out of the crowd. When everybody's whispering what they didn't like, I was the one speaking up. So then that's when I realized that I was chosen to be the one to speak up when no one else wants to speak up. So I was born, but also trained how to become a leader.
So it sounds like your power was to basically go against injustice. So fight injustice, essentially, in the workplace and be that power for everybody. That's amazing. Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to share? Yes.
So for me, it was really based on my why, and that's really to bring together people that can meet their potential and see their own worthiness so that we together can challenge the status quo. So taking together other people to push forward.
Thank you. So to me, that sounds like your power is lifting others up. Is that correct? That's right. And see, those are amazing powers. And I think, like Natanya was saying, often I think all of us have gone into leadership roles with the best of intentions. But it's really important that we take a step back and think, what are we doing with this power? And what impact is this having on others? So recently, an example for me is I have an amazing team, and everyone that I work with, they go above and beyond. And I'm so grateful to be having individuals like this on my team. And so I had another department come to me and say, one of your team members hasn't been doing this job correctly. And so I said, okay. And they said, yeah. So we had tasked them to do the specific thing, and they didn't do it right. So initially I was like, okay, I'll talk to this team member and see why they didn't do it right. And I knew when I was going to have that conversation with the team member, it was going to crush them because they were putting in their 100%. And so hearing that they had done this completely incorrectly, I knew it'd be disappointing news to them. And of course, I was planning on delivering it in a nice manner. But then I took a step back and I thought, okay, well, why did they not do it correctly? So I went back and I asked the department, I said, okay, so you had asked them to do this. Did you show them how to do this? And they said, no. And I said, because I'll tell you, if you asked me to do it, I wouldn't know how to do it and I would do it incorrectly. So we asked somebody to do something without teaching them or showing them how to do it. And now we're disappointed because it's not done right. That's not on them. That's on me and you. Yeah. And so I did end up having a conversation with that particular employee. And I said, you know, you were asked to do this and this is having to be redone, but I'm going to take accountability for it because I didn't do my job properly of making sure that you had everything you needed to succeed in this role. So I'm sorry for that, but we're going to rectify that. So now we're going to learn how this needs to be done. And then so you can actually do it correctly and succeed in it. And I think that's one of the many examples of where I think we need to consider empathy, because empathy lies with us. So it's easy to always find fault in others or see where things need to be improved in others. But as leaders, once again, we are the ones that ultimately hold the power. So we always need to come back and reflect on what is it that we're doing and how can we do it differently to make this successful and to uplift others and make it so there's not injustice. And so, yeah.
Awesome. I'll just going to say one more sort of theme, and then I think we'll turn it over if anyone has a question. And then I know that all of the helping crew here is working overtime, literally overtime. So I want to be quick and respect that. To say that another area for those who aren't in leadership that is risky, and obviously, again, this is sort of a platitude, but I hope someone can take away or maybe be inspired in a way to find the courage within yourself to help challenge and maybe show your leadership and be the voice where others don't have them. Kind of like what Brian had said, right? So to be brave enough to risk reproach, to risk a consequence, and not in a combative way, but help perhaps show that mirror to leadership that where maybe their humanity isn't quite on display in the moment, right? So help them see that empathy might be the key to a better result. So don't forget that obviously a bottom line might be the goal, or an ROI might be the goal, or a productivity end result. You know, those things are obviously important for organizational functioning. It's the way we live in a capitalist society, but you don't have to be a part HOLE to get there, right? And so there's also great stuff you can say to a boss like, oh, if you're not sure if you're being that, there's a Reddit thread, AITA. Anyone heard of that one? Yes, exactly. They can check that out anytime and ask to crowdsource that sense, am I being that? So it's a great way to, as a litmus test. So, but really it is true, like to empower all of us that watching and not saying and doing anything, it kind of makes you part of the problem. So sometimes the most kind, benevolent, wonderful folks are the most reticent. And that's kind of an interesting combination, because then if everyone is there, everyone is suffering. So that was my sort of parting message to encourage to you, because again, I didn't think we needed the AITA for barometer for this crowd, but you know, and just so you know, it's a tool out there. But that, you know, if you can find the courage within yourself, just like Brian had said, to be part of the solution for your colleagues, for your brothers and sisters who may or may not be able to find their voice to speak up. And the best way is to, instead of, you know, not only in a rebellious way, like employee rights, you know, but in a sense of illuminating the human element of empathy that might be missing and showing it to that leadership such that perhaps for them it becomes the only choice to make a shift, the choice that they want to go towards, because then they can be the hero too of their story.
I could not use the mic and just use my mom voice, but I'll save you guys, spare you. In my professional and personal life over the years, I have seen the rise of what I believe to be cognitive dissonance. We live in a society, and again, this is my personal viewpoint. I challenge you researchers out there to please research this. But the sensitive nature that where we come to a place where every question is now a challenge, every boundary that is being set is perceived as offensive. And so we're in a society where I see, especially with social media, the cognitive dissonance and the refusal to learn new skills, even when those are presented, which further digs the hole into how do we grow our minds if we can't accept change. So I wanted to know, what are your interpretations as leaders of that issue that you see?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I guess about 2 years ago now, I started working at a new organization where they hadn't done much change over the past 50 years. And I'd say probably in the past 2 years, I've probably implemented about 30 different changes. And it started with my team, because my team are the change agents. And what I found was, it's not that they don't want to change. I think the underlying concern is fear. So there's a fear of losing competency in what they've been doing. There's a fear in being vulnerable, of being judged for not doing a good job anymore. And also a fear as to, is this going to stay? So if I put the time, effort, and vulnerability in to do this, yet in another 2 weeks, you're just going to go back to the status quo, then is it really worth me doing this? And once again, I think that's where it goes back to leadership. You need to have that safe space where everyone feels comfortable in being vulnerable and okay with letting go. So like we talked about yesterday, unlearning and learning, but then also being consistent and like you said, having those difficult conversations and having those boundaries as a leader. So they feel safe to know that, yeah, I trust, even though this is going to be scary for me, I trust it because I trust my leader. And I think that's what's really lacking right now.
And I guess one small thing to add, and again, these are sort of very generic tips, so obviously there's more detail to break it down, but some things I found when you're approaching someone with a new concept is to use a story, use an analog of something that they do care about or that they want to happen. Like you start with positive language, like, I know you want the best for this company. And we all do, and we're here to support that. But there's also some things happening that aren't optimal and actually are hurting us all, and you might not be aware. And I'd like to tell you about them and some ideas I have about what we can do to fix it. And I'd like your help. Invite them to be a part of the solution. And I found that to be at every level of an organization for folks, quite older than me, quite wealthier than me, quite more famous than me. If you do that and not put them on the defensive, that's a great way to kind of have someone lower their guard and be willing to kind of take stock and maybe re-examine and do a shift.
I was wondering, given everything from decentralization to increasing virtual work and changing workplaces, do you think that the way that we work, as that changes, that is changing any of the nature of what it means to be a leader, or at least traditionally?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it is, because I think the way leadership was seen before, let's say, is more hierarchical, where there's someone who's overlooking everyone doing their work. But my concept of leaders is leaders make leaders. So I think that's going to be more vital now, more than ever, with this new decentralized model, because if you are really empowering people to be leaders, that work is going to be done. You don't need to be micromanaging. What you need to be doing is empowering and instilling those skills. And so it's going to be leadership in a whole new different level. And that's why it's really important that we are able to build those skills and competencies in individuals, because now, as we move to the virtual world where we're going to be utilizing technology, and also the values of this new generation is that they want to be empowered, they want to collaborate, they want to be partners, they don't want to be told what to do. It's going to be really important that the leadership styles change.
And I want to add to that a little bit, thank you. When you said about partners. So I think the other thing is the landscape of who is a leader is changing, and that's phenomenal. I say this respectfully, but leadership used to kind of, well, look at the memes I found. I had to struggle to find anyone other than the first few pictures when I was just looking for boss memes, right? So we're having different kinds of representation for the first time in many higher levels of organizations, which is fantastic. And we have different kinds of cultures, people who live and love and worship and look differently from one another. And what that means, hopefully, is that more people can be more respectful of these sort of cultural intersections that can cause misunderstanding, can cause, so that even when intent isn't necessarily perhaps negative, it might be ignorance, and work together to, instead of just wave a finger or be angry, but find a way, is there a bridge that we can build here together? Can we recognize these biases or constructs that we've put in place that really don't serve others, but they've been suppressed or oppressed for such a time that they don't feel like they can say it. So there's a lot of places that are shifting right now in organizations throughout. And I think we're going to hear more kinds of voices, more policies, more governments, more standard operating procedures, taking into consideration different needs, differently abled people. And that would be, my hope for where the shift is going and how each one of us can probably, within our organization, help have that lens and make sure that lens is reflected back to the leadership. Oh, and I think if you're okay with it, I think we're going to have to end because, well, I'm sure everyone's hungry and all that. Is there one last question that you need to go? Okay. I think we're good. Thank you.